The morning light filtered through Liam Walsh's studio window, casting long shadows across the half-packed canvases that had been his life for the past year. Harbor's End, with its weathered lighthouse and dramatic cliffs, had given him everything an artist could want: inspiration, solitude, and a place that almost felt like home. Almost. He ran his fingers along the edge of his favorite piece, a sweeping vista of the bay at sunset, the colors bleeding into each other like memories. The painting wasn't coming with him to New York. It was destined for the Harbor's End Gallery, his parting gift to the town. To her, Liam sighed, wrapping another canvas in brown paper. The Wallace Foundation grant was everything he'd worked toward: financial security, recognition, and access to the competitive world of international art. Turning it down would be professional suicide. He'd made his decision weeks ago, but somehow the act of packing made it real in a way that twisted his stomach. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "It's open," he called, knowing exactly who it would be. Elise Chen stepped into the studio, bringing with her the scent of coffee and sea air. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, wisps framing her face as she surveyed the disassembled studio. "So it's really happening," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tremble in her hands as she set down to coffee cups. "Tomorrow morning," Liam confirmed, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. "First train out," Lise nodded, moving around the studio with the familiarity of someone who belonged there. As the curator of Harbor's End Gallery, she had spent countless hours in this space, discussing lighting and composition, arguing playfully about framing choices. Sitting in comfortable silence as he worked, she picked up a small sketch profile as she gazed out at the ocean during one of their walks. "I still need this for tonight," she said, gesturing to the large seascape he'd been touching. "The centerpiece of your goodbye show." "It's yours," he replied, then clarified, "The gallery's, I mean. Right?" Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "The gallery's." Liam turned away, unable to hold her gaze. There had always been something between them in energy, a connection that neither had been brave enough to name. Now it was too late, and the thought filled him with a heaviness he couldn't shake. "The mayor's coming tonight," Elise continued, professional as ever, "and Mrs. Harrington from the Arts Council. They're all sad to see Harbor's End's resident artists leaving." "I'm not that special," Liam demurred, wrapping another painting. Elise's laugh was soft, but genuine. "You transformed our little gallery from a tourist trap selling seashell paintings to a place people drive hours to visit. I'd say that's pretty special." What she didn't say, what neither of them said, was how she had transformed him too. How her belief in his work had pushed him further than any teacher or critic. How her quiet company on his darkest days had kept him painting when inspiration abandoned him. "I couldn't have done any of it without you," he finally admitted, the words inadequate for what he meant. Something flashed across Elise's face. Perhaps, or resignation. "Well," she said, collecting herself, "tonight is about celebrating your success, not mourning your departure. 7 o'clock. Don't be late to your own goodbye party." She turned to leave. Liam felt words rising in his throat, dangerous words that might complicate everything. He swallowed them back. "Elise," he called instead. She paused at the door, looking back. "Thank you." "For everything," she nodded once, her expression unreadable. "See you tonight, Liam." After she left, Liam stood motionless in the center of his half-empty studio, surrounded by the fragments of a life he was choosing to leave behind. The Wallace Foundation grant letter lay on his desk, official and imposing. His future mapped out and prestigious. Galleries and international residencies, yet all he could think about was the way Elise's eyes had darkened when she'd said goodbye party, as if the very words caused her pain. The gallery hummed with subdued conversations. As Liam straightened his collar for the third time, through the window, he could see Harbor's End, bathed in the golden glow of evening. The same light he'd spent months trying to capture on canvas. His work lined the walls, a year of his life translated into color and texture. "Nervous?" Mayor Collins asked, appearing at his side with 2 glasses of champagne. "A bit," Liam admitted, accepting the drink. "It's strange to see it all displayed like this, like closing a chapter or a whole book," the mayor replied, glancing toward the entrance where Elise greeted new arrivals. Some stories are harder to walk away from than others. Before Liam could respond, the mayor had moved on, leaving him with his thoughts and the weight of unspoken words. His gaze drifted to Elise. She wore a simple blue dress that reminded him of the ocean at dawn, a moment he'd painted her once. When she didn't know he was watching, the memory pulled him back to last winter. When a storm had knocked out power across the village, the gallery had been freezing, and they'd huddled by the emergency lantern, sharing a bottle of whiskey to keep warm while protecting the artwork from the leaking roof. Why landscapes? She had asked him, her face golden in the lantern light. You never put people in your work. Liam had considered the question carefully. People complicate things. Nature just ... is. That's the coward's answer, she'd challenged, eyes bright with whiskey and honesty. You're afraid of the mess. The unpredictability. Maybe he'd conceded, their shoulders touching as they leaned against the wall. Or maybe I just haven't found the right person to paint. Her eyes had met his then, and for a moment he thought she might lean forward, close the distance between them. Instead, she'd taken another sip of whiskey and said, when you do, don't let them go. Watching her move confidently through the crowd, Liam wondered if he'd already found that person and was about to walk away anyway. Elise approached, professional smile in place. They love the Lighthouse series, she said, gesturing to a group of collectors. I've already had 3 offers. You should take the highest, Liam replied. The gallery deserves it. The artist deserves it, she corrected. This is still your work. Consider it my thank you for everything you've done, he hesitated, then added. I wouldn't have this opportunity without you pushing my work to the Wallace Foundation. Something flickered across Elise's face, a shadow he couldn't interpret. That's my job, she said quietly. It was more than that. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The gallery seemed to shrink around them, the crowd fading into background noise. For a moment, they were just 2 people standing on the precipice of something terrifying and wonderful. Then Mrs. Harrington from the Arts Council interrupted, pulling Elise away to discuss funding, and the moment shattered like glass. Throughout the evening, Liam found himself watching Elise from across the room, remembering fragments of their year together. The afternoon they'd spent at the tide pools, where she'd shown him the hidden colors in seemingly ordinary shells. The night he'd found her crying in her office after her father's health scare, and they'd sat in silence, his hand covering hers until she was ready to speak. The countless mornings she'd appeared at his studio door with coffee and criticism that somehow always made his work better. As the crowd thinned, Liam found himself standing before his largest piece, the view from the cliffs at sunset. With the lighthouse silhouetted against the blazing sky, he'd painted it the day after he received the Wallace Foundation letter, pouring his conflict onto the canvas. You captured it perfectly, Elise said, appearing beside him. The moment before everything changes. Liam turned to face her. Elise, your train leaves early, she interrupted, her voice professional but strained. You should get some rest. What if I made a mistake? He asked suddenly. Applying for the grant, planning to leave, ... Hope flashed across her face, quickly replaced by careful neutrality. You didn't. This is everything you've worked for. Not everything, he said quietly. Elise took a deep breath. Liam, don't. Not tonight. She was right, of course. What right did he have to complicate her life now, when he'd had months to speak? To act tomorrow, he would board a train to his future, and Harbor's End Andalusia had become another place he once lived, another person he once knew. I should finish packing, he said finally. I'll walk you out. The night air was cool against their skin as they stood outside the gallery. Harbor's End slept around them, streetlights casting pools of yellow on the cobblestones. Thank you for tonight, Liam said, hands in his pockets to keep from reaching for her. It was a beautiful goodbye, Elise replied, her eyes reflecting the streetlights like stars as they stood there. Everything they'd never said hung between them, heavy as storm clouds. Liam wanted to clear the air, to finally speak the truth, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he leaned forward and kissed her cheek, a gesture that felt both too intimate and woefully inadequate.
Goodbye.
Elise, he whispered. Hey, goodbye, Liam, she answered. her voice steady even as her eyes filled with everything her words couldn't express. Dawn broke over Harbor's End as Liam stood on the train platform, his life reduced to 2 suitcases and a portfolio case. The station was empty, save for a sleepy attendant and an old man waiting for the newspaper delivery. No one came to see him off, which was exactly as he'd planned it. Clean breaks were easier, at least that's what he told himself. His phone vibrated with a message. "Left something for you at the ticket counter." Curious, Liam approached the counter where the attendant handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a miniature painting no larger than his palm of the view from his studio window, rendered with Elise's distinctive attention to emotional detail. She rarely shared her own artwork, claiming her talent lay in recognizing greatness in others, not creating it herself. Yet here was proof of her skill and her understanding of what he was leaving behind. On the back she'd written simply, "Some views stay with you, no matter where you go." Something broke inside Liam then, a dam he'd constructed carefully over months of knowing he would eventually leave. The feelings he'd suppressed came rushing forward, desire, tenderness, and the terrifying possibility of love. The train whistle sounded once, twice, its call piercing through the morning fog. A warning, a final chance. Liam looked down at the painting in his hands, then at his luggage waiting to be loaded. He thought of New York, of the Wallace Foundation, of the career he'd dreamed about since art school. Then he thought of Elise's eyes last night, how they'd spoken volumes her voice never could. "Sir," the attendant gestured to the open train door. "We're departing." Liam hesitated for just a moment before making the decision that would change everything. He grabbed his portfolio case but left the suitcases. "I need to make a call," he told the confused attendant, stepping away from the train. The doors closed with a pneumatic hiss, and the train pulled away from the station, carrying with it the future he'd planned. In its place stood possibility, terrifying, wonderful possibility. With shaking hands, Liam dialed Elise's number, not knowing what he would say, only that he needed to hear her voice. When she answered, sounding sleepy and confused, he found himself laughing, a release of tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Liam, aren't you supposed to be on the train?" "I was," he admitted. I should be. But I'm not." "What are you saying?" Her voice was cautious, as if afraid to hope. "I'm saying," he took a deep breath, watching the train disappear into the distance. "I'm saying some views are worth staying for." The silence on the other end stretched until he feared he'd misunderstood everything. Then came the sound of muffled movement, a door closing. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. "The train station. Don't move." 15 minutes later, Elise's car skidded into the station parking lot. She emerged wearing what appeared to be pajama bottoms under a hastily thrown-on coat, her hair a wild tangle around her face. She'd never looked more beautiful. Liam stood rooted to the spot as she approached, her expression a storm of confusion and hope. When she reached him, she stopped just short of touching. "You're Grant," she said. "Your career. New York will still be there," he finished. "If I want them. But this is now. And I'm tired of pretending I can walk away from it." "I pushed you toward that, Grant," Elise confessed, her voice breaking. "I thought it was what you wanted. What you deserved." "You were right," Liam said, finally allowing himself to reach for her hand. "I do deserve something amazing. I just didn't realize it was already right in front of me." The first touch of their lips was tentative, a question asked and answered in the same breath. Then Elise's hands were in his hair, his arms around her waist, and they were kissing as if making up for a year of missed opportunities. When they finally broke apart, Liam rested his forehead against hers, breathing in the scent of sleep and sea, air and possibility. "What now?" Elise whispered against his lips. Liam smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "Now," he said, "we go home, and I finally paint the portrait I've been afraid to start." As they walked hand in hand toward her car, the sun broke fully over Harbor's End, painting the world in the colors of new beginnings. Behind them, the empty train tracks stretched toward a future that could wait. Ahead lay the village they both loved, and the promise of a story just beginning to unfold. Sometimes the bravest journey is the one that leads you back to where you truly belong. 3 months had passed since the day Liam hadn't boarded the train, and Harbor's End had transformed with the changing season. Summer tourists had given way to autumn's quiet contemplation, the village reclaiming its authentic self under skies. Heavy with gathering clouds, in Liam's studio, the same one he'd nearly abandoned, new collection was taking shape. No longer focused solely on landscapes, his canvases now explored the intersection of person and place, each one telling a story of belonging. At the center of the studio stood his masterpiece in progress, a portrait of Elise, standing at the edge of the cliffs, hair whipping in the wind. Caught between earth and sky, you're staring again. Elise called from the kitchenette where she was brewing tea. Having arrived an hour ago with pastries from the village bakery, professional hazard, Liam replied with a smile. I'm an artist. We stare. Well, this subject is starting to feel self-conscious. She brought over 2 steaming mugs. Settling beside him on the worn leather couch that had become their favorite spot for evening conversations, Liam accepted the tea, but set it aside to pull her closer. The subject is breathtaking, he murmured against her temple. Their relationship had blossomed with surprising ease, as if they'd merely been waiting for permission to be together. The village had received the news with knowing smiles, apparently. Everyone had seen what was between them long before they'd admitted it to themselves. Heard from the Wallace Foundation today, Liam said, his tone carefully neutral, Elise tensed slightly in his arms. And they've offered to defer the grant until next fall. He said my current work shows promising evolution. He traced patterns on her arm as he spoke. They want to see where this new direction takes me before I join the New York program. Relief and worry battled across Elise's face. That's wonderful. And how do you feel about it? Grateful, he said honestly. It gives us time. The unspoken question hung between them. Time for what? To see if this relationship could last. To determine if Harbor's End was truly home? Or merely to postpone an inevitable goodbye? Elise pulled away slightly, meeting his eyes. Liam, I need to know. Are you staying because of me, or because this is where you want to be? Both, he answered without hesitation. You helped me see what I really wanted. This place, this life. He gestured to the studio around them, to the half-finished portraits and the view of the village below. Creating work that matters to me, not just to critics or foundations. And if the day comes when Harbor's End feels too small again, when you need more than what we have here, it was a fair question. Liam had spent his adult life moving from place to place, never setting roots deep enough to hurt when they were pulled up. Elise, who had left for college only to return and revitalize her hometown's art scene, understood the value of belonging in a way he was just beginning to grasp. Then we'll figure it out together, he promised. But right now, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. The tension eased from her shoulders, and she curled back against him. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the skylight in a soothing rhythm. I have something to show you, Elise said after a while. From her bag, she produced a small envelope. The Portland Gallery reached out. They want to feature your new collection and some of my work alongside it. Liam's eyes widened. Elise rarely showed her art publicly, despite her undeniable talent. That's incredible. A joint exhibition? They're calling it Convergence, exploring how 2 artists interpret the same place through different lenses. Her eyes shone with excitement. It could be the beginning of something bigger for both of us. In that moment, watching her animated expression as she detailed the opportunity, Liam realized something profound. Staying hadn't meant sacrificing his ambitions. It had transformed them into something richer, something shared. What had felt like an ending on that train platform had actually been a beginning. Later that evening, they walked along the cliffs despite the drizzling rain. The lighthouse beams sweeping across the darkening water in rhythmic pulses. Elise's hand was warm in his, her presence a constant he'd never known he needed. I want to show you something, she said, leading him down a narrow path he'd never noticed before. It wound through wind-swept grass to a small cove sheltered from view by jutting rocks. How have I never found this place? Liam marveled, taking in the intimate beach and the way the waves curved perfectly into the shore. "Some things reveal themselves only when you're ready to see them," Elise replied, her voice nearly lost in the sound of the surf. The rain intensified, plastering their clothes to their skin, but neither moved to leave. Instead, Elise turned to face him, reaching up to brush wet hair from his forehead with tender familiarity. "I've been afraid to say this," she admitted, "because I didn't want it to be a weight on you. A reason to stay if you needed to go." Liam's heart quickened. "Tell me now." "I love you," she said simply. The words carried on the salt air between them. "Not because you stayed, but because of who you are. Estless spirit and all." The words unlocked something in Liam's chest. All his life he'd been searching for a feeling he couldn't name, chasing it from city to city, canvas to canvas. Standing here in this hidden cove with rain streaming down their faces, he finally recognized it. Home wasn't a place at all. It was this moment, this woman, this choice. "I love you, Elise," he said, the words feeling both momentous and utterly natural. "I think I have since that first day you criticized my use of light in the harbor painting." Her laugh was bright against the gray day. "You were so offended." "I was intrigued," he corrected, pulling her close. "No one had ever seen through my work to me before." Her kiss tasted of rain and certainty, deepening as the lighthouse beam swept over them, illuminating them briefly before returning them to the intimate darkness. Elise's hands moved beneath his wet shirt, tracing the contours of his back as he pressed her gently against the smooth rock face of the cove wall. "Here," he whispered against her neck. "Here," she confirmed, her eyes reflecting the wild sea behind them, "where no one can see us but the ocean." They made love with the desperate tenderness of people who had nearly missed their chance, the rain creating a curtain around their private world. Every touch was both a discovery and a homecoming, their bodies learning a language that needed no translation. Afterward, they huddled together under Liam's jacket, watching lightning flash on the distant horizon. "The storm's moving away," Elise observed, her head resting on his shoulder. "Not all storms are meant to be weathered," Liam replied, thinking of the storm of doubt and fear that had nearly carried him away from Harbor's End from her. "Sometimes they're just showing you which direction not to go." She smiled at that, interlacing her fingers with his. "Very poetic for a visual artist." "You inspire multiple forms of creativity," he teased, pressing a kiss to her damp hair as they made their way back to the village. The lights of Harbor's End glowed warm and inviting through the misty evening. Liam felt a sense of peace he'd never known before, not the temporary calm of a new beginning, but the deep tranquility of being exactly where he was meant to be. That night, watching Elise sleep beside him, Liam realized the Wallace Foundation grant could wait another year or forever. The journey he needed to take wasn't across the country, but into this life he'd almost been too afraid to claim. Some trains were meant to be missed. Spring arrived in Harbor's End with a riot of wildflowers, along the cliffside paths and fishing boats freshly painted for the new season. The gallery, under Elise's direction, had expanded into the vacant space next door, now featuring a rotation of local artists alongside traveling exhibitions that drew visitors from up and down the coast. Liam stood in the center of the main gallery, surveying the space that would soon showcase Convergence, their joint. Its exhibition scheduled to open the following evening. His landscapes and portraits hung on one wall, while Elise's abstract interpretations of the same locations mirrored them on the opposite side, creating a visual conversation across the room. "What do you think?" Elise asked, joining him after directing the installation crew on the final lighting adjustments. "It's perfect," Liam said, his voice hushed with awe at seeing their vision realized. "Better than I imagined." The centerpiece of the exhibition stood in its own alcove. Liam's portrait of Elise at the cliff edge paired with her abstract rendering of the moment. He decided not to board the train. Together, they told the story of their choosing each other, of finding home in another person. "The Portland curator arrives tonight," Elise reminded him, checking her watch. "And the Wallace Foundation is sending a representative." Liam nodded, feeling surprisingly calm. 9 months ago, the thought of having his work scrutinized by the Foundation would have tied his stomach in knots. Now it felt like just another step in a journey he was no longer taking alone. "Are you nervous?" he asked, noticing the slight tremor in Elise's hands as she adjusted an already perfectly placed painting. Terrified, she admitted with a small laugh. "I've spent so long promoting other artists' work. Being on the other side feels ... exposed." Liam wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they gazed at their complementary works. "Your art deserves to be seen, Elise. It always has." She leaned back against him, drawing strength from his presence. "Did you finish packing?" Their trip to Portland after the exhibition opening would be their first time away together, a week to meet with gallery owners and collectors interested in their unique artistic partnership. It represented a bridge between Harbor's End and the wider art world, a compromise neither had thought possible before. "Almost," Liam replied. "Just waiting on one last thing." "Don't tell me you're still working on a piece," Elise groaned. "The exhibition is literally tomorrow." "Not for the exhibition," he assured her, with a mysterious smile. "This is something else entirely." That evening, as Harbor's End settled into twilight, Liam led Elise to his studio. The space had evolved over the months, becoming a blend of both their aesthetics, her colorful textiles softening his minimalist furniture, her books mingling with his on the shelves. It felt like everything else in their lives now, like a perfect collaboration. "Close your eyes," Liam instructed as they reached the door. Elise raised an eyebrow, but complied, allowing him to guide her inside. He positioned her carefully in the center of the room before stepping away. "Okay, open them." Lisa's gasp echoed in the quiet studio as she took in what stood before her, a small house, meticulously crafted as an architectural model, set on a table in the center of the room. The design was modern, yet welcoming, with large windows and a wraparound porch. It sat on a miniature cliff, overlooking a painted ocean. "What is this?" she breathed, moving closer to examine the details, the tiny easels visible through the studio windows, the garden wrapping around the side, the two Adirondack chairs positioned to watch the sunset. "Our future," Liam said simply. "If you want it," he joined her at the table, pointing out features as he explained. "I've been working with an architect that plot of land past the lighthouse that no one has developed because of the difficult terrain. Turns out it's perfect for a cantilevered design." His fingers traced the roofline. "Studio space for both of us, gallery potential for visiting artists, even a small guest house for when Portland or New York come calling." Elise's eyes widened as she understood what he was proposing. "Liam, it's a home. A permanent home." "Yes," he confirmed, watching her face carefully. "I've spent my life moving from place to place, always searching. But everything I need is right here in Harbor's End." He took her hands in his. "With you." Tears welled in Elise's eyes as she took in the detailed model, the physical manifestation of a future together. "But what about your travels?" "Your work has always been about capturing different places." "It still can be," he assured her. "We'll travel, we'll explore. But we'll always have this place to return to." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This home to build together." Elise's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring, a delicate silver band with a small, perfect pearl nestled in twisted metal that echoed the shape of waves. "I'm not asking you to be the reason I stay anymore," Liam said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm asking if you'll be my partner in building something lasting, something neither of us could create alone." Tears spilled onto Elise's cheeks as she looked from the ring to the model house to Liam's hopeful face. "All those months ago, when you didn't get on that train, ... Best decision I never made," he finished with a smile. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly. "Yes to the house, yes to the future, yes to you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the last pieces of Liam's restless heart settled into place. The train he hadn't boarded had seemed like an ending, a foreclosure of possibilities. Instead, it had opened a door to a life richer than any he could have imagined one where ambition and belonging weren't opposing forces, but complementary parts of the same canvas. Later, they walked along their cliff, the lighthouse beams sweeping over them in steady rhythm. Below, the village lights of Harbor's End mirrored the stars above, creating the illusion of being suspended between two heavens. "Do you ever regret it?" Elise asked quietly. Not taking the Wallace Foundation opportunity when it first came? Liam considered the question seriously, knowing she deserved complete honesty. "I don't regret the choice," he said finally. "But sometimes I think about that version of Mitha, one who got on the train, and I wonder if he ever figured out what he was really looking for. And what was that?" Elise asked, though her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. This Liam said simply, gesturing to the space between them, to the village below. To the ring catching moonlight on her finger. The courage to stop running and start building. The wisdom to recognize home when I found it. Elise smiled, leaning into him as they gazed out at the horizon where sea met sky in an infinite line of possibility. "Some journeys take you far away," she mused, "while others bring you exactly where you need to be." As they stood there, entwined against the gentle spring night, Liam understood with perfect clarity that the most meaningful travels weren't measured in miles or destinations. They were measured in the decisions that led you to where you truly belonged. And sometimes, in the trains you chose not to board. Tomorrow would bring critics and curators, questions about their artistic vision and future projects. There would be trips to Portland, and perhaps eventually New York. Exhibitions and opportunities that would test their resolve and creativity. But tonight, there was only this moment, two artists who had found in each other the missing piece of their creative souls, standing at the edge of a horizon painted in the colors of promise. And in Elise's eyes, Liam saw everything he'd ever been searching for. A love as vast as the ocean, as steady as the lighthouse beam, and as enduring as the art they would create together in the home. They were building on the cliff above Harbor's End, the end that was really just the beginning.